Now, making your own paddles, it can be done, but the trick is what do you use? What are paddles made out of? I've made them out of mud flaps before, but they don't hold up very well. They're a little too flexible. The best thing that you should make them out of, and what they're made out of, generally from the aftermarket or from the factory, is conveyor belting. So belt that goes down on conveyors, that's what they stamp the paddles out of. The second best thing, because conveyor belting can be expensive, hard to find, the second best thing is old tires. And here we got one. You need a large enough tire that you can get the paddle shape out of the sidewall, but then you don't want too heavy duty of a tire because then the sidewalls are too thick, but then you don't want too light of a tire because then the sidewalls are too thin. So you get old worn out tires for nothing everywhere. This just happens to be a very common size, the 235/75 R15. And these MTD paddles actually fit on the sides. This is a replacement original. So you have to be able to, you don't want to be too close down here or too close up here because then it gets way thick. You can see the thickness. This piece was cut out from down at the very bottom. You can see how thick that is, and you can see how fast it tapers down to about this sidewall, which is almost a little bit too thin. So to test out this tire, I actually cut out one. What I did was I just set an original on. I took like a paint marker, Sharpie metallic marker, and I drew around the outside, and then I just used a razor blade to cut it out. You don't want to go too far up because then you get into the wires to the radial part of the tire. You go too far down, and then you actually got metal rings down here. But this tire is a little too thin. It's a little too thin and floppy up there. See that compared to a replacement? It's hard to tell, but this one's way, I'll just hold it at the end, you know. This one is way stiffer, and the stiffer the better almost on these things. And here's an original one that came from MTD, and well, it's already pre-curved, but it got a good amount of stiffness to it as well. This would work. So if you want to save 50 bucks, you can take your original ones, this is the original one, and lay it down on the tire, mark it out, and cut it out. Just remember that the way these wear is because there's no support down in this area. There's actually not going to be as much wear on there as there is here and here. So I would determine how much of a gap you had between here and here, because chances are it's still touching here on the housing, and it's probably going to be about 3/8 to 5/16. And I would add that here and just taper it into here, and I'd add that here and taper it down into there, and I'd cut out from there. So to show you that, I would take this, I'd lay it down, first to draw it all out. This marker doesn't work good. Yeah, you can see it. In between here and here, I would add, I'd start out at whatever my gap is, and I would just taper it down in. Same thing down here. Add it. Taper down in. Make sure you can still see my line. And this stuff with a sharp razor blade, it actually cuts pretty easy. So just get started. If you ever wanted to feel how hard it is to slash a tire, it's about that hard. So That'd be the beginning of the paddle. Cut out the bottom. Don't keep your hand behind it, because if you slip, you're going through your hand. And that's getting thick down there. Snowblower paddle. Steel belted. So, you can see how thick it gets down towards the bottom. This is a passenger rated tire. An LT would give you a little bit thicker. Probably be a little bit nicer. But you wouldn't want to go with a, you wouldn't want to go too heavy of a rated tire, because then it's going to be so thick. It's going to be like cutting through that the whole time. So we take this, and we take our original one, and then what I would do is line it up on there. Line up the bottom, because the bottom hasn't changed from the factory when they did it. And punch your holes, or drill your holes directly in there. Let's do that. Take that, see where it's lined up just right. Try not to leave the place on those ones. Try to keep those lined in there. You'll notice that the drill will never actually make a hole like you want. It pretty much just keeps closing back up, but if you work at it, and that is a homemade paddle. Now it's not as nearly as stiff as the original, so it's going to work, but it's not going to be perfect. It'll wear out faster. It won't have as much pull, because how the paddles pull the snowblower, because these are softer. They'll bend easier, but it will work. You install those the same way as you would these ones. And then if you left that a little bit big, or if it's too big once you install it, you can actually just come back and while it's installed, just shave at it, trim it. I do recommend nipping these corners off, because those are where it hits first. So nip these corners off like the originals. And put this new. It's going to be a little more difficult because those holes never do drill right. If you have a leather belt punch to make new holes in your belt, that works a lot better. So I will just actually perfect. We'd be stand to be trimmed just a little bit right here. And that's how you homemade the paddle.